The elevator doors whispered open on the 42nd floor, and for a second, I expected the usual Thursday morning bustle. Phones ringing. The murmur of design teams arguing over lighting choices. Marcy's laugh trailing from reception. Instead, silence. My name is Claire Delos. I'm 41, and I live in San Francisco. Or at least I did, before Tokyo, before this. My heels clicked across the polished concrete as I stepped into the office, my office. I hadn't even gone home. Still wearing my charcoal Brioni travel suit, a quick twist of hair with a lacquered clip, tablet in hand with the finalized proposal from Yamada Global Designs. A 12-year contract for their international campus revamp. It was the deal of my career. The one that put Delos and Kin on the global map. And yet, the air felt wrong. Too still. Marcy's desk sat abandoned. Her coffee mug was there, half drunk, her favorite purple scarf tossed over the back of her chair, but no Marcy. I rounded the corner, scanning for any sign of movement. The lights were on. Monitors humming. But not a soul. That's when I saw it. An envelope on my desk, centered. Deliberate. Thick, creamy paper, crisp edges. My name on the front in my father's calligraphy. My stomach dropped. I set the tablet down gently, like if I made too much noise the whole office would collapse. I opened the envelope. Inside, a folded sheet of embossed letterhead from the board of directors. At the top, bold type. Effective immediately, the board has appointed Evan Delos as Chief Executive Officer of Delos and Kin Architecture. I sat. Not immediately out of shock, more like my legs no longer cooperated. My brother. My younger brother. Evan, whose most significant professional achievement was designing a co-working space that doubled as an oat milk cafe. Evan, who left 3 internships early because he was emotionally misaligned with the firm's vision. My hands trembled as I skimmed the rest. They framed it as fresh leadership, future-forward repositioning, harnessing generational synergy. Corporate poetry 4, thank you for building the empire, now hand it to your brother. I pulled out my phone. No texts. No calls. Not even from my father. A chair scraped somewhere near the back offices. Then footsteps. Not hurried, just awkward, like someone realizing they shouldn't be there. It was Ben from finance, eyes wide, carrying a reusable lunch bag. Claire, he stammered. I didn't know you were back today. I wasn't supposed to be, I said flatly, folding the letter and placing it back into the envelope. Surprise. He shifted uncomfortably. They told us, yesterday. I think. I'm sorry. I stood, adjusted my collar. Is my father in? He hesitated, then shook his head. Left early. Evan's in the studio gallery. With the board. Of course he was. The space I designed from a napkin sketch, the one I stayed up 40 nights to finish in time for the Pacific Heritage Expo, now his stage. I walked to the window, stared out at the skyline. 10 years rebuilding the firm after the scandal. 3 global partnerships. Dozens of awards. A Tokyo contract signed not 12 hours ago. And it all added up to a hand-delivered envelope and silence. I didn't say anything else. Just picked up my tablet, tucked the envelope into my bag, and walked out the door. Without a sound. I don't remember the drive. Just a blur of pine trees and dusty roads, the hum of the tires beneath me like a slow exhale. I must have stopped for gas somewhere near Auburn, maybe grabbed a black coffee and a pack of almonds. But I don't remember any of it. The foothills welcomed me like they always had, quiet, uneven, unbothered. The dirt road to the old Sierra property had washed out a little since last winter, but I knew how to handle it. A few careful turns, and there it was, the cottage. I had designed it a decade ago as part of a conservation architecture project for the state. Half stone, half glass, solar paneled, off-grid, and still standing like it was waiting for me. It had been a shelter for wildlife researchers once. Now it was mine. The inside smelled faintly of cedar and dry earth. I lit a fire in the stove out of habit, even though it wasn't cold. Just something to do with my hands. There was no self-service up here. That had always been the point. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, turned it off. The moment the screen went black, the tension in my shoulders eased, like I'd dropped a bag I didn't know I was carrying. For the first time in years, there were no meetings. No pitches. No interns waiting to be mentored. No press calls asking for quotes. Just silence. I woke early the next morning. Made coffee in a chipped enamel kettle. No milk. No sugar. Just dark and hot, the way I needed it. I took it outside, barefoot, and sat on the porch. The forest stretched out below the hill in a tapestry of soft greens and fog. I could hear a creek somewhere beyond the trees. That's when I started walking. The trails were still there, half overgrown, but I remembered them. They wound past the old footbridge we restored in 2016. The stone one that nearly broke the budget because I refused to use fake veneer. The railing was cracked now, moss creeping up the side, but it was still beautiful. I stopped near the creek and sat on a flat rock. For the first time in days, I let myself feel it. The betrayal. The anger. The exhaustion. I had missed my niece's first ballet recital to negotiate a municipal contract in Singapore. I had signed the Tokyo deal on 3 hours of sleep. I cancelled a honeymoon to pull the firm out of litigation. I gave everything, my time, my health, my marriage. And they handed it to Evan like it was a soccer trophy for participation. That night, after dinner, bourbon and a grilled cheese, I pulled out my private sketch folder. The one no one at the firm had ever seen. Buildings for people, not investors. A floating library off the Oregon coast. A homeless housing unit built from repurposed shipping containers. A park redesign for a crumbling neighborhood in Fresno. All drawn in pencil, all unfinished. I flipped through them slowly, then reached for a new page. I wrote one word at the top, foundation. Then I made a list. Clients I trust. Contractors who'd follow me. Projects I walked away from too soon. Favors I never called in. The bourbon burned a little less on the second glass. I slept that night with the journal beside me, and the fire still crackling in the stove. Not angry. Not broken. Just quiet. And ready. It started with a phone call I didn't answer. Then a voicemail I almost deleted. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice said, "too bright, too rehearsed. Evan's putting together a little dinner for the family this Friday. He asked for you specifically. Just something casual. No pressure, but we'd love to see you." I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand and a knife in the other, halfway through slicing lemons for a roast chicken I wasn't going to eat. For a moment, I considered erasing the message. Pretending I never got it. But something in her tone stuck with me. That forced lightness. That overly practiced, "He asked for you." He didn't. I knew it. Evan didn't ask for anything except the title they handed him on a silver platter. Still, I went. Not for reconciliation. Not even to make a scene. I just wanted to see how they'd act now, face to face, when they couldn't hide behind envelopes and boardrooms and voicemails. The dinner was held in the firm's newly renovated studio gallery, the one I had designed to showcase cultural legacy projects. A place once meant for design students, architects, and artists to engage in meaningful conversation. Now it looked like a high-end Pinterest board. Edison bulbs hung like sad little halos from the ceiling. Concrete slabs posed as tables. Everything was glass, slate, and pretension. My mother greeted me with that overly familiar hug that didn't involve her arms. Evan stood by the bar in a navy blazer and sneakers, cradling a tumbler of something neat. He grinned when he saw me. The performance had begun. "Claire," he said, walking toward me like we were close. "You look relaxed." "Retreats are good for the soul," I replied. "Especially when they're not planned." He laughed too hard at that. The rest of the family was already seated. My father sat near the end of the long table, expression unreadable. The board chair, Miriam, was there too, surprise, smiling as if nothing had happened. Evan clinked his glass after the third course, which was some kind of dehydrated beet salad that tasted like dust and ego. He stood, all confidence and curated charm. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began. It means the world to me to have family support as we transition into a new chapter at Delos and Kin. I sipped my wine. We're moving toward a more immersive, future-facing design model, he continued. Integrating virtual architecture platforms with social impact initiatives. Architecture not just as shelter, but as experience. He paused for applause. Got some. That's why we've begun rebranding efforts and are moving away from legacy preservation to more agile design systems. I let the silence sit for a moment, then pushed back my chair slowly. Is that why we lost the $9 million preservation deal with Harrow and Blythe? Every eye turned to me. My mother stiffened. My father blinked. Evan's face froze. What? He asked, too quickly. I stood, hands calmly on the table. Harrow and Blythe pulled out 2 weeks ago. They were concerned about strategic misalignment. Which is polite code for, we don't trust the new leadership. I turned to Miriam. Was the board ever informed? Miriam looked like she might choke on her sparkling water. Claire, Evan started, we're in talks with. Save it. You lost the most historic urban revival project in the state because you wanted to design in the metaverse. No one spoke. I adjusted my blazer, picked up my clutch, and looked at my mother. Thank you for the invitation, I said. Then I walked out, leaving behind a gallery full of silence, cold beet salad, and a CEO who finally looked a little unsure of himself. I didn't respond to any of the calls that came in the next morning. Or the texts. I let them pile up like snow on a windshield, soft, silent, and in the way. First, it was Nadia from our Berlin office. A simple, hey. That dinner sounded rough. Call if you want to talk. Then Jonah, who had quit last year to start his own boutique firm in Portland, still can't believe they went with Evan. If you're thinking of building something new, I'd be interested. Even a few clients reached out. Nothing dramatic. Just feelers. One message from a historic preservation nonprofit read, if you ever go independent, please let us know. We've admired your work for years. And they kept coming. Some offered coffee. Some offered condolences. A few offered contracts. I didn't take any of the meetings, not yet. But I read every word. Carefully. By the end of the week, I had purchased a new leather-bound journal from a stationery shop in Nevada City. Dark green, hand-stitched. I liked the way it felt, solid, private, deliberate. I titled the first page in block letters, Foundation. Then I started listing names. Contractors I trusted, people who delivered under pressure, who didn't care about titles or politics, just the work. Clients I knew were watching Evan fumble and weighing their options. Former staff who'd hinted they'd follow me anywhere. Vendors who still owed me favors. Developers who had reached out after Tokyo but were hesitant about the firm's new direction. I didn't draw up any plans. I didn't call anyone back. Not yet. I just catalogued. There was power in restraint. Power in knowing I didn't need to rush. Let them keep flailing under Evan's immersive vision. Let the cracks spread until the facade couldn't hold. Every name in my journal represented a piece of something bigger, something that wasn't about legacy anymore. It was about leverage. I sat by the window that evening, the hills below fading into blue shadow, the scent of pine and old stone filling the cottage. My phone buzzed again on the table. I turned it over, screen down. Not yet. This wasn't revenge. It was preparation. The offer came on a Tuesday, slipped between a client inquiry from Madrid and a voice memo from my tax attorney. Subject line. Creative director opportunity, Aurora and Finch. I almost ignored it. Thought it was a recruiter casting too wide a net. But then I saw the sender, Amy Walters, Chief Operating Officer. We'd met once, years ago, during a panel on sustainable urban revival in Berkeley. She'd asked a single question that stuck with me: how do we design buildings that leave legacies, not just impressions? I remembered her because she didn't ask it to impress the room. She genuinely wanted to know. The email was brief, direct. Claire, we've followed your Tokyo work with interest. And what happened at Delos hasn't gone unnoticed. If you're considering your next move, I'd love to talk. We're restructuring our leadership team and think you'd be a natural fit for creative director. Full autonomy. Co-ownership track. Let me know. I read it 3 times. My coffee went cold. I didn't answer right away. I went for a hike instead, 4 miles up the ridge, then back down through the creek trail. I needed to move. To breathe. To picture what that life might look like. Working with peers, not inheritors. No family drama. No board politics. Just pure design leadership in a city that respected it. By the time I got back to the cottage, my boots were caked in red dirt, and the sun was starting to drop behind the pines. I rinsed my hands in the stone sink, poured a glass of water, and sat down with the journal. I opened to the page titled Foundation. That's when I knew. Aurora and Finch was a beautiful offer. Clean. Respectful. Substantial. But it would always be someone else's story. Someone else's vision. I didn't want to build on top of someone else's scaffolding. I wanted to raise the frame myself. I typed the reply slowly. Amy. I'm honored. Truly. And I believe in what your firm is doing. But I have to decline. I think it's time I built something of my own. With gratitude. Claire. I hit send. And I didn't look back. The smell hit me before I even reached the porch. Empanadas. My mother's, specifically. Buttery, flaky, with that faint scent of cumin and sweet onion. I hadn't smelled that in months. Not since before Tokyo. Not since before Evan. I paused on the steps of her mission-style home in Pacific Heights, wondering if this was a trap. Then again, she'd always known my weaknesses. Fresh pastry and false comfort. The door swung open before I knocked. She stood there in a soft cardigan, eyes tired but carefully lined, like she wanted to look presentable for the trial. Come in, she said, like it was any other Sunday. The kitchen hadn't changed. Still too beige. Still with that framed photo of the original Delos firm from the 70s, my grandfather, my father, and a very young me holding a wooden model of our first commission. Evan wasn't in that picture. He hadn't been born yet. On the table sat a full plate of empanadas and 2 mugs of tea. She gestured toward a chair. Sit. I did, carefully. We chewed in silence for a while, just like we used to. She folded her napkin slowly before speaking. Evan's overwhelmed. I blinked. No preamble. He won't admit it, she went on. But the board is restless, and the staff turnover is higher than it's ever been. He's trying, Claire. He really is. But he's not qualified, I finished for her. She didn't argue. She just sighed and looked older than I remembered. I told your father this would happen, she muttered. But you know how he is about bloodlines and appearances. And you? I asked. She met my gaze evenly. I thought, maybe if he succeeded, things would smooth out. That you'd eventually come back. Quietly. Supportively. I let out a small, bitter laugh. As a ghost, you mean? She didn't deny it. Then came the pitch. Evan's open to you consulting. Behind the scenes. No public announcement. You'd have influence, a generous salary. No stress. I leaned back and let the silence hang heavy. No, I said. She blinked. No? I'll come back, I said. But not in the shadows. Not with your conditions. She sat straighter, defensive now. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll return under 3 terms, I said. 35% equity. Co-CEO title. And Evan steps down publicly. Not quietly. Not reassigned. Demoted. Officially. She stared at me like I had spoken in another language. You're not serious, she whispered. I stood. Pulled the folded terms from my coat pocket. Slid them across the table. You called me back for help, I said. This is how it happens. Take it or leave it. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then she reached for another empanada, like the room hadn't just shifted. You've changed, she said softly. I smiled. No. I've just stopped pretending. They chose the location. A minimalist design salon in Soma, all pale oak and neutral tones. The kind of space with silent air purifiers and imported water bottles that cost $12. A backdrop for civility. I arrived first. Slid the printed agreement from my leather portfolio and laid it on the ashwood table like a placemat. Evan walked in next, a few minutes late, blazer wrinkled, hair styled like he'd slept in a rideshare. He smiled like this was brunch. My father came last. Still in his dark suit, still refusing to acknowledge the optics of this meeting. He gave a tight nod and sat directly across from me. No hugs. No small talk. Shall we? I asked. Evan reached for the papers and flipped through them with unnecessary speed. His eyes darted, but I knew he hadn't read a single clause. 35% equity, he muttered. That's high. You've diluted the firm's brand equity by 20% since March, I replied. My offer is conservative. He glanced at our father, who remained silent. Watching. Waiting for me to blink first. I didn't. I'm open to co-leadership, Evan tried, but I think the demotion phrasing is non-negotiable. Evan froze. Publicly? Yes. Press release. Website update. Organizational chart. All of it. Come on, Claire. That's humiliating. I stared at him. Evan, you launched a metaverse showroom with a live DJ at a housing affordability summit. I think we're past humiliation. My father exhaled sharply through his nose, but said nothing. I pushed the papers forward. Read the full terms, I said. You'll see I've left room for transition grace. You keep a role, creative culture liaison. Plenty of room to explore the future, just not in charge of it. Silence. He flipped a few more pages, slower this time. Why now? My father finally asked. His voice was low, gravelly. Why come back at all? I looked at him. For the same reason you built the firm in the first place. Because someone has to protect the damn integrity. His eyes didn't waver, but something in them shifted. He reached for the document and began reading. Actually reading. Veto power? He asked. Yes. Legacy project oversight? Yes. He looked at me. Really looked. You built this place back from scandal. You brought it to Tokyo. I never said thank you. I shrugged. You don't have to. He nodded, slowly. Then signed. Evan stared at him, stunned. Dad? It's done, he said. We can't afford to keep pretending. Evan's jaw tightened. So that's it? She gets everything? No, I said, standing. I get what I earned. And you get to keep your desk, your title, and your sneakers. Just not the throne. I gathered the signed agreement and tucked it back into my portfolio. As I turned to leave, my father said quietly, Claire. I paused. I was wrong, he said. About how this would go. I nodded. You weren't the only one. And then I walked out, heels clicking on the soft gray floor, leaving behind two men sitting in a perfectly curated neutral space. One relieved. One broken. And both finally out of my way. No announcements. No press release. No catered welcome back breakfast. Just a keycard that still worked and a nameplate that reappeared on the office door overnight. I walked into headquarters at 8:02 a.m. on a Monday. The lobby was quiet, but not silent. The kind of quiet that comes with anticipation. Like a storm building behind the drywall. Marcy was at her desk again. She stood the moment she saw me, like she wasn't sure if she should smile or apologize. I nodded. Morning. Morning, Claire, she said, voice steady, like it used to be. I stepped into the executive wing and noticed small things. Someone had swapped out the firm's original watercolor renderings for digital canvas loops, Evan's idea. They buzzed faintly with stock music. I tapped the screen of one and muted it. A few junior staff looked up as I passed. Some with cautious hope. Some with relief. I didn't stop until I reached the corner office. Mine again. Inside, everything was pristine. Not untouched, just reset. My old chair. My files. My framed photo of the team after the Kyoto housing project, back where it belonged on the windowsill. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called a leadership meeting. They filed in slowly, senior designers, department heads, a few junior leads who'd been hastily promoted under Evan's tenure. Evan himself came in last, dressed like he was ready for a podcast interview, not a staff debrief. He sat near the end of the table, quiet. I stood. Let's get a few things clear. Everyone froze. We're scaling back on trend chasing. No more digital concept showrooms, no more architectural NFTs, no more hollow partnerships with companies that want our look but not our values. I made eye contact with each of them. We built this firm on legacy. On civic design. On intelligent solutions that outlast buzzwords. That's where we're going again. No one interrupted. I clicked the remote and brought up a new slate of initiatives: historical site reinvestment, sustainable housing pilot expansions, a proposal for restoring flood-damaged schools in Marin. Real work. With real impact, I said. If you're here for likes, followers, or virtual walkthroughs of imaginary buildings, this probably isn't the place for you anymore. Evan shifted in his seat. I turned to him. Effective today, Evan will serve as our creative culture liaison. He'll oversee community outreach and help connect our designs to educational platforms and public engagement projects. A polite way of saying, figurehead. Decorative. Harmless. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I turned back to the room. Questions? None. Good. Let's get to work. As they filed out, a few of the senior architects lingered to shake my hand. Quiet gestures. No fanfare. That was fine. I didn't come back to be celebrated. I came back to rebuild. On my terms. And the foundation had just been poured. 2 months later, I stood barefoot on the rooftop garden of our new sustainable design wing, a glass of red wine in one hand, a sheaf of notes in the other. The air smelled like rosemary and warm soil. Planter boxes overflowed with native plants we'd integrated into the passive cooling system. Beneath my feet, the slate was locally quarried. Reclaimed. Like me. The skyline of San Francisco stretched before me in its stubborn, brilliant chaos, glass and stone, cranes and fog, everything layered and humming. Somewhere down there, a historic district we'd helped preserve was in the early stages of a quiet rebirth. 2 blocks west, our community design hub had reopened with twice the foot traffic since we dropped the trend pieces and focused on actual needs. Inside, the firm was alive again. Staff turnover had slowed. Clients who had drifted returned with cautious optimism. The energy felt different now, rooted, collaborative, focused. Evan had found his rhythm in his new role. He wasn't a leader, but he was surprisingly good at mentoring high school students through our outreach workshops. He'd started a program called Future Blueprints that paired young creatives from underserved communities with junior designers. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't sabotaging. He was useful. We still didn't talk much, but we nodded when we passed in the halls. That was enough. I took a sip of wine, watching the city lights flicker on. Behind me, the door to the garden clicked open. Marcy stepped out, holding her phone like it was something fragile. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "Your mom texted." I raised an eyebrow. Marcy hesitated. "It's not urgent." She just wrote, "Dinner Sunday?" "Just us this time." "I'm making the orange salad you like." I took the phone, read the message once, then again. No guilt. No pressure. Just her. And me. I nodded. "Tell her I'll come." Marcy smiled. "Good." She turned to go, then paused. "Claire?" "Yeah?" She glanced around at the rooftop. "It's good to have you back." I gave her a small, honest smile. "It's good to be back." When she was gone, I sat on the low bench near the edge of the garden, the city sprawling beneath me. I thought about everything I'd lost, my title, my illusions, my place in a family that had always expected me to prove my worth. And what I'd reclaimed. Not just the firm. Not just the name. But myself. Not as a martyr. Not as the backup plan. Not as the good daughter holding everything together. Just Claire. Builder. Leader. Architect. I raised my glass to the skyline and whispered, "Here's to legacy." Then I drank. And exhaled.